Let's begin with this site. So this is the Information is Beautiful site, and they have a fantastic visualization of the world's biggest data breaches. I really like this diagram because it gives a great sense of just how significant online attacks can be. We can drill down into an attack such as the Anthem incident and get more information about it. But what should really strike you as I scroll down this page is just how many attacks there were, of really significant size as well. Compromising a web server can be very, very big business. And as you can see here, many of these attacks result in the compromise not just of thousands or tens of thousands or even millions of records. We're talking tens of millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions of customer records exposed when web assets get hacked. Now, of course, there are many different ways that a web asset can be hacked. It can be the web application that gets compromised, and it can also be the web server. Let me give you some examples of that. Here's a good example of what I mean by web servers being hacked. This is an incident involving Global Sign back in 2012, and this was simply a case of a piece of open source software not being updated. That particular piece of software had a known vulnerability in it, and because Global Sign hadn't patched it, attackers managed to use that vulnerability to gain control of the servers. Here's another good example, EA Games and their web server hosting a phishing site. Attackers love to compromise legitimate sites to host their phishing site because there's a much greater chance of it staying up than them simply creating some random new website and standing up a phishing page. And as you can see here, this was a case of old vulnerable software giving the attackers a way in. This one was in 2012, and the particular phishing site was targeting Apple ID holders. So yet another example of a web server being compromised by a malicious actor. Another example again is a site that spent a lot of time in the news for all the wrong reasons in 2014, healthcare.gov. And as you can see here, their server was also hacked and infected with malware. So not just a malicious site or an attacker gaining access to content on the site, but malicious software which could then cause further damage. Now this ran for about a month in the site in 2014, and it's a great illustration of just how malicious attackers can be when they have the ability to compromise the web server itself. Now, of course, there are all sorts of other things that attackers can do once they have control of a site. Defacement is a great example. We've seen that many times, particularly with hacktivists. So the legitimate site either removed and replaced with one of the attacker's choosing, or modified in a malicious fashion. Privilege escalation, giving other people higher access rights than what they should have. Data theft is an obvious one, stealing information out of the site, but also gaining access to other resources on the same server. So what happens if an attacker compromises a web application on one site? Does that give them access to web applications on other sites? If a web server is poorly configured, that could well be the case. And certainly we'll talk about sandboxing of websites later on in this course. So that's a bit of an intro of why this course is important and why hacking web servers can lead to serious consequences. Let's now move on and start looking at the range of web servers we have out there on the internet today, and we'll also take a look at a little bit of info about how they actually function.